He got fired the same morning I retired, boxed up by security, while my gold watch ticked quietly in its velvet case. Name's Ron, 62, forklift guy, turned accidental CEO. Funny how the smell of burnt coffee and a spotless employee badge can make you rethink fatherhood. Ever had life hand you the mic after everyone stopped listening? They seated me next to the dishwasher exit. Not the in-laws, not even old friends, just the waiters. I arrived 15 minutes early just to be sure I wouldn't cause a scene. I had ironed the collar of my gray suit twice that morning and polished my shoes with an old sock dipped in window cleaner. When I pulled into the gravel parking lot of the wedding venue, a rustic barn-turned-reception hall nestled in the outskirts of Eureka Springs, I saw the string lights already glowing like lazy fireflies against the setting summer sun. Inside, the laughter echoed from the far end of the room. I followed the sound past barrels stacked with hors d'oeuvres and toward the wall of seating charts. My name wasn't among the circular tables under the garlands. Instead, a small printout at the bottom corner read, Darvin Wolf, Table 16, Service Access. More quiet over there, a young usher said, avoiding my eyes. Figured you'd want space. Space. That's what divorce gives you plenty of. Space between memories, space in photographs, space at your son's wedding. Table 16 was pressed against the exit doors where servers weaved in and out, carrying empty champagne flutes and plates of lamb skewers. One of them, a red-headed girl with a tight ponytail, gave me a brisk nod before whispering to her coworker. That guy's here for the back refill, I think. I adjusted my cufflinks. No explanation seemed necessary. From my vantage point, I could see the entire party unfold. Mina gliding like a queen in pale blue silk, laughing with the bandleader, Tice leaning toward Marlene as she dabbed his cheek, beaming. My name didn't come up in the toasts. Even the slideshow skipped every birthday I remembered organizing First Trampoline his 8th grade science fair, the disastrous beach trip when he forgot sunscreen. The photos jumped from toddler years straight to college. A toast was delayed because they couldn't find the father of the groom. No one looked around. My water glass stayed full. The folded napkin sat untouched in my lap, its pleat as perfect as the moment I sat down. The linen left a faint ring on the wood when I lifted it briefly to wipe sweat from my upper lip. I stepped outside when the dance began. The DJ called for Tice and his father, but then a murmur passed and the mic corrected Tice, and the man who raised him Bruce. I hadn't known Bruce was coming. The summer air outside was sticky dense with honeysuckle and something burnt from the grill. I stood near the parking lot watching shadows swirl under the tent poles. My car was where I left it, still dusty from the drive. On the dash, my old ceramic coffee mug sat upright. Its glaze uncracked the letters number 1. Dad a bit faded but intact. A breeze rattled the trees. I leaned back against the hood, pulled out my phone. One new email, HR Archives. Subject 401k Records, Re-Wolf. No explanation, no body text. Just an attachment. I didn't open it right away. I stared at the subject line until the screen dimmed. I wasn't just placed apart tonight. I'd been erased from the narrative entirely, like someone photoshopped out of a group picture, and no one noticed the empty space. In the barn, laughter exploded again. I could hear the scrape of forks, the swell of applause. The kind of sound you make when the story feels whole. I pressed the mug closer to my chest and whispered, "Tell me the story again, but this time, let me be in it." I stayed out there longer than I meant to. The music changed inside one of those syrupy love ballads Tice used to hum when he still lived at home. Funny thing is, I don't think he even realized he was doing it then. Pacing his room, barefoot textbooks scattered around him, mind adrift in melodies, while mine clung to overdue bills. I traced the condensation line on my coffee mug with my thumb. It had been with me since Tice was in 4th grade, a Father's Day gift from a craft fair. I remembered him handing it to me wrapped in tissue paper, his gap-toothed grin, proud as any medalist. It once held coffee every morning. Now it just sat there, a relic more present than I seemed to be in his life. The email still blinked. 401k Records, Re-Wolf. Could have been a mistake, or a sign, or neither. When I finally went back inside, most of the crowd had dispersed toward the dance floor. I slipped back to table 16 unnoticed, sat with the servers folding linens. One handed me a leftover roll warm in the center. I nodded thanks. She didn't ask who I was, and I didn't offer. Moments like that, quiet, stripped of ceremony, sometimes hold more truth than 1,000 wedding vows. Later, I stood at the edge of the barn, watching Tice spin Mina for an awkward mother-son dance. Marlene hovered nearby, a glass of white wine in hand, her laugh sharper than I remembered. Someone tapped the mic again this time, announcing a group photo. I wasn't asked. I stepped outside once more this time, not out of sadness, but necessity. I needed to breathe. There was too much perfume, too many candles, too many reminders. By the car, I looked at myself in the side mirror. 57 years carved in lines under my eyes, silver threading through my temples. I wasn't invisible. I was just edited. When I finally slid into the driver's seat, the mug toppled slightly, resting against the gear shift like a passenger. The email was still there waiting. I tapped it open, inside a scan of an old form pension amendment, someone else's signature beside mine. The past bureaucratized. I closed it. And then I drove not away from the party, but towards something else. Maybe it was closure. Maybe it was the beginning of rewriting the story with me back in the frame. But first I needed coffee, fresh, not from the mug that had seen everything and been said nothing. I made spreadsheets for 32 years. Inventory forecasts, vendor chains, quarterly projections, you name it. But nothing prepared me for the kind I was making now, one that tracked where I disappeared. It was 2:12 a.m. The only light in my apartment came from the screen of my old Dell monitor, its fan humming like an old refrigerator. My bare toes tapped the floor unconsciously as my eyes flicked between old Excel sheets and a tangle of emails archived years ago. My apartment, Little Rock, one-bedroom, was stripped of noise and personality. A brown recliner, coffee-stained folders, a curling frame certificate from 1996, and a tower of yellowing manila envelopes. The smell of reheated mac and cheese still lingered, but I'd lost track of how many nights ago that was. I clicked open another folder, Wolf Benefits. Final. The email at the top was from July 2017. Subject line, Q3 adjustment. That word again, adjustment. I hovered my mouse over the Excel attachment. Downloaded. Rows unfolded like dry leaves, payroll codes, distribution columns, deferred earnings. My initials stared back at me from the corner cell of tab 2. A red font entry blinked under discretionary allocation, Mina approved. I blinked. It wasn't the number that bothered me, it was the timing. August 2017. 2 weeks after Mina had hosted that HR barbecue where I wasn't invited, citing optics. I looked around my apartment. My only company was the creased wedding invitation still propped up next to the printer. The floral print looked tired under the blue glow of my screen. I reached for it, turned it over, and with a dull Sharpie scrawled, "Return gift." Outside, a car alarm chirped once and fell silent. My neighbor upstairs coughed. The refrigerator buzzed back to life. And somewhere deep inside my inbox, an email pinged. I whipped around. RE 401k statement, follow-up. My breath caught, but it was junk. An automated reply from a server I didn't recognize. I leaned back, exhaled, and rubbed my temples. The spreadsheet was still open. Tab 3 had something new. A note field labeled Temporary Reallocation 28,040, cleared pending approval. The approval signature, M. Wolf. It didn't even need her full name to sting. There was no way Tice knew. He was 17 at the time, barely knew how taxes worked, much less how parental benefits were transferred. But Mina had known, and someone had quietly redlined me out, not just as a husband, but as a person who once helped build the foundation of their lives. A knock startled me. It was soft, almost tentative. I peeked through the peephole. Ms. Holloway from next door. Her gray bathrobe was frayed at the hem. "Your light's been on for 3 nights," she said when I opened the door. "Just checking you're still alive." I tried a smile. "Spreadsheet emergency." She nodded, not laughing. Sometimes it's not about the sheet, but the ghosts hiding in the rows. After she shuffled away, I returned to my seat, her words sticking like sap. I saved the file under a new name, Final Statement. Wolf.xlsx. I wasn't entirely sure what I planned to do with it. but I knew it was the first line I'd drawn in years. Back in the day, my spreadsheets tracked shipping containers and bonuses. Now they were the only maps left to explain where all the missing pieces had gone. Of my money, my marriage, and maybe even me. Avra stirred her sweet tea once, twice, then slid the sugar packet across the table like a mic. "Your turn," she said, her chipped pink nail tapping the formica. I stared at the packet. I hadn't held a microphone in years, unless you counted the time I led a safety training in '09. Even then, it was clipped to my belt an afterthought. But this felt like a dare. "I'm not exactly keynote material," I muttered. Avra smiled like she'd heard it before. People always think quiet men have nothing to say. Until they take the stage. The vinyl of the booth creaked as I shifted. Bessie's Diner hadn't changed since the early '80s, and I'd bet the radio hadn't either. Elvis crooned low in the background something about blue suede shoes. Grease hung in the air, sweetened by the faint clatter of waffle irons from the kitchen. A waitress with a bun too tight and a heart too open refilled our coffees without asking. "You're the quiet one from that factory strike, huh?" she said, tilting her head. I gave a nod. She winked. "Knew it." Avra raised an eyebrow. "See, even small towns remember the ones who shut up last." I didn't answer. I just looked down at the paper napkin where I'd been folding and unfolding the corner. She leaned in elbows on the table. "Darvin, listen, you've got receipts, numbers, names. You're not chasing shadows." "It's not just that," I said slowly. "It's Tice. He's got a life now. What would I be doing dragging ghosts into his wedding scrapbook?" Avra snorted. "Dragging ghosts, honey, your ex and that Stepford replacement already built the scrapbook without your chapter." I blinked. Her words weren't cruel, just clear. That was Avra. A woman who once audited 6 branches solo in a month and still had time to bake pies for the union potluck. She softened. "You know what I've seen over and over, men like you, erased not by malice, but by paperwork. Quiet signatures, discretionary lines, and you sit there thinking maybe you deserve to be forgotten." The sugar packet lay between us, a little crumpled now. She reached into her tote canvas frayed strap and slid out a yellow folder. There was a faint coffee ring on the front and what looked like powdered sugar near the corner. "Take this if you decide to do something," she said, her voice lower now. I hesitated. "What is it?" "Instructions. Whistleblower protections, media channels. Names that still pick up when I call." I didn't touch it. She reached for her tea again. "It's not revenge," she said almost to herself. "It's restoration." We paid in silence. I insisted, though. She rolled her eyes and said, "Don't think this makes us even." When we stepped out into the sun, it was harsher than I expected. The parking lot shimmered with heat, and the tar stuck to my soles as I made my way back to the car. I sat for a while, engine off, the diner's neon sign flickering in my rear view. Finally, I opened the folder. Typed pages, contacts. One sheet titled Order of Disclosure, another showing a flowchart internal inquiry, HR breach, press. But what caught my eye was a yellow post-it scrawled in looping cursive. "Your voice still works." I don't know why, but that was what got me. I started the engine. The drive home was quiet. My old coffee mug, clean unused, sat in its usual place on the dashboard. The sun had faded the logo to a dull beige, but I still traced it with my thumb like a habit. I turned onto my street. Mailbox crooked from last winter's ice. I stopped, pulled out the bundle of flyers and envelopes. One cream-colored card slipped out, Tice's wedding thank you note. "Mr. Darwin Wolf," it read, in neat gold emboss. Darwin, not even my name. I stood there for a full minute. Just the cicadas, the fading light, and that stupid typo singing louder than any band ever could. The email went out at 7:23 a.m. By noon, silence was louder than any answer. Darwin sat at the edge of his chair, watching the sent folder like it might blink back. The subject line, requesting clarity, 401k discrepancy, hovered at the top, unread by Mina, unread by Tice, and chillingly marked seen by Marlene. The only reply came from an intern, a name he didn't recognize. "We can corroborate if needed. Kindly advise on further steps." He read that sentence 7 times, then opened his cabinet. A half bag of stale beans, 2 mugs. He picked the blue one, his favorite. The glaze had faded, but it fit his hand like memory. The rain outside didn't pound, it whispered. Somewhere between 2017 and 2023, so had his place in the family. His Dell monitor buzzed softly. The cursor blinked under the last line of his draft spreadsheet. He'd made sure not to accuse anyone directly. Just numbers, signatures, dates. The cold facts that left no room for sentimentality. A ping. He turned hopeful, but it was an out-of-office auto-reply. Mina Wolf. Thank you for your message. I will be unavailable until further notice. Further notice. He exhaled through his nose, the kind of sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Darvin opened the bottom drawer and retrieved a printed page from the 2019 holiday party, an HR memo signed hastily. His signature was there all right. Crooked, rushed. Just above the typed line, consent to reallocation protocol, voluntary and understood. He hadn't understood. Not then. Not until the pension numbers refused to align, until the final statement clashed with the contributions logged on his own printouts. Back then, the office was decorated with garlands and stale cookies. Mina had worn a red shawl and danced with the VP, while Darvin tried to slip out early unnoticed. He remembered the way the lights flickered when he signed, the way someone laughed behind him, as if already in on the joke. He set the paper on the table, reached for the kettle. The coffee hissed as it met the ground steam swirling in the cold kitchen light. He poured it carefully, but when he reached for the cup, it slipped a soft clink against the granite counter. Not a crash, just a crack. A thin, spidery line that ran from rim to handle, like a fault line in his chest. He didn't curse, didn't scream. He just stared at the cup. Outside, the rain thickened, tracing long streaks across the window pane. The sky sagged in a quiet gray, the kind that never breaks, but lingers. Darvin wiped the counter, the mug still in place, then picked up the thank you card he'd received yesterday. Ivory cardstock, gold lettering. Mr. Wolf, thank you for celebrating our union. His name was misspelled. The E at the end had been replaced with an S. He turned it over, a smudge of lipstick. Marlene's, he'd attended the wedding, sat near the waitstaff, ate rubber chicken, while others toasted. But even the card, pre-written and impersonal, forgot who he was. His phone vibrated on the edge of the desk. A message from Tice. Can we meet before Sunday? No apology, no subject. Just a sentence. Darvin didn't move. He just stared at the screen, then down at the cracked cup. A wisp of steam curling like a question mark. He brought the cup closer, traced the fracture with his thumb. The crack didn't leak, not yet, but it would. Just like everything else. Marlene replied, accidentally hitting reply all. The sound of that phrase echoed in my head as I stared at the subject line, RE clarification requested. Wolf account. It had arrived at 10:12 p.m., well after office hours, during a thunderstorm that knocked out the hallway light and made the walls of my apartment creak like they were remembering something. She'd written in a rush of digital candor. He's just bitter, don't let him ruin what we've built. That we detonated in my chest like a controlled charge. I read it 3 times, then I scrolled down to see who had been included in the thread. Me, Avra's intern, and Mina. No BCC, no blind forwards. Just full exposure, like the curtains pulled back on a play I didn't know I was in. I took a slow breath, the kind that tastes like copper. My desk lamp buzzed faintly, casting a pool of amber light across the folders I had spent the week assembling. The shadows of coffee cups, uncapped pens, and half-folded notes played tricks across the ceiling. I moved deliberately, no panic, just the steady rhythm of a man who had built spreadsheets in quiet offices for 32 years and now found himself managing a very different kind of ledger. I highlighted Marlene's message, pressed Ctrl+Shift+S, and saved a PDF copy to a folder labeled Integrity. Then I opened a fresh Word doc. Title Statement of Standing, D. Wolf. I let my fingers hover over the keyboard, then began typing. I was never absent. Just erased. I let that line sit for a moment. I didn't know if it was for the labor board or the ethics committee or just for myself. But it was the truth. Not poetic, not righteous, just a quiet, durable truth that didn't flinch under fluorescent light. The email chain, as it turned out, stretched back further than I'd assumed. Someone, maybe Avra's contact, had attached prior conversations as context. I scrolled through forwarded notes, expense sheets, and a familiar document from 2019. Compassionary Adjustment Allocations, Wolf T. In it, my name had been replaced by a numerical code. The line item was marked Temporary Withdrawal from Inactive Primary Account Paternal. Use Tuition Buffer. Home Transition Support. No one had told me I was inactive. I hadn't even missed a payment. The fine print said the transaction had been approved jointly by authorized domestic partner, account manager, HR, and guardian of record. That last part, guardian of record, was underlined. Mina. I leaned back. The chair creaked beneath me. So that was it. Not malice, maybe, just efficiency. I'd been cleaned out of my son's future like a smudge on a screen. All in the name of what we've built. I forwarded the entire chain, Marlene's reply, included to the labor compliance email Avra had scribbled onto the back of a diner receipt. I attached the PDF copies of my retirement withdrawal logs, added my wedding RSVP with return gift still scribbled across the front, and included a scanned note from Tice's high school graduation, the one where he'd written, "Thank you, Dad, for always showing up. Always showing up." I hadn't realized until now how long I'd been showing up to places I wasn't wanted. I hit send. Then I waited. The first reply was predictable, out of office. This inbox is not currently monitored. For urgent matters, contact Regional HQ. But then a second one followed, same address. Mr. Wolf, we are reviewing your submission. Expect follow-up within 5 business days. It wasn't dramatic. No FBI vans, no courtroom summons. Just quiet protocol. But it was more response than I'd received from my own family in months. At 11:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. Tice, no emojis, no preamble. Dad, were you ever in debt? I stared at the screen thumb, hovering over the reply. My first instinct was to correct him, to say something dry, like, debt isn't the same as being written off, but that wasn't the point. He was asking because someone somewhere had told him a version of the truth where I had failed. And now, perhaps for the first time, he wasn't entirely sure it was true. I didn't reply immediately. I reached for the manila folder Avra had given me, the one with the faded post-it. Your voice still works. It sat on my bookshelf just below a dusty coffee mug I hadn't touched since that morning Mina moved out. I'd stopped using it even after washing it a dozen times. Something about it always smelled like old arguments and reheated silence. Tonight, though, I took it down and rinsed it again. This time, I filled it with warm water. Just water. No bitterness. Just something clear. When I took the mic, it wasn't even on. But I kept speaking. Loud enough. A cousin leaned in as I rose from the back table, napkin still in my lap. It's not on the schedule, she whispered, eyes darting toward the stage. I smiled, patted her shoulder, and walked forward anyway. The room buzzed with silverware and champagne, and those conversations people have when they're not listening. I didn't need a schedule anymore, or a mic. The ballroom's chandeliers shimmered above rows of white linen tables. They had called this the Wedding Encore, a second celebration in Hot Springs, hosted mostly for Marlene's side of the family, who couldn't attend the main event. I'd been invited late. Not directly, but with a forwarded evite that simply said, "Assume welcome." Tice stood near the head table, his tux looser than before. Bow tie undone, a drink in hand. He hadn't seen me yet. I reached the podium. No spotlight, no announcement. The mic had a faint red light blinking standby. I adjusted it anyway, letting the motion catch attention. A few heads turned. Then more. I won't take long, I said. No amplification, just me. A waiter froze mid-pour. Someone chuckled uncomfortably. I let the silence hold. I was told once that quiet men must not have much to say. I began, eyes on the back wall. That's not true. Sometimes we just wait for the room to quiet itself. A hush spread reluctantly at first. I continued steady and even. My name is Darvin Wolf. Some of you know me, some don't. I was married to Mina for 21 years. We had a son, Tice. I looked at him then. He didn't flinch, just held his glass, and listened. In 2019, I signed a form at a holiday party. I was told it was a routine adjustment. It wasn't. I pulled out the folded printout, the one I had copied twice, and stored in a folder labeled Final Statement. That paper allowed a financial restructuring, one that took my name off things slowly, quietly. It was labeled as compassionary credit, meant for Tice's education. And it came with my signature. I don't dispute that. What I didn't know was how many others knew what I didn't. I scanned the room. Mina's chair was stiff, untouched. Marlene stared at her drink fingers white against the stem. I unfolded a second page. This is an email dated 4 weeks ago. It was a reply accidentally sent to all. From Marlene. I paused, then read aloud, "He's just bitter, don't let him ruin what we've built." The words bounced in the air like a dropped plate. Stillness, no coughs, no murmurs. I never asked for much, I said softer now. I wanted a seat. Not at the main table, just in the room. I raised a boy, taught him how to skate, how to fix a hinge, how to apologize properly. Not loudly, but sincerely. Tice's mouth tightened. He looked at me, really looked for the first time in months. I folded the pages, slid them back into my jacket pocket. If you're wondering why your gift from me felt light, I said, half turning to the guests. It's because most of it was spent long before you danced. Gasps were swallowed. One person, a man near the cake table, clapped. Just once. Then again, a second person joined. Then a third. Avra appeared at the doorway holding a rain-dotted umbrella, giving me a nod that said, "That's enough." I nodded back. Walked down the steps. Behind me, a glass shattered. Mina had dropped her drink. The clapping stopped. I didn't look back. "I read everything you sent," Tice whispered. "Why didn't you fight back then?" His words came like the mist curling off the Wachita River, soft, cold, and not entirely unexpected. We were walking the trail that hugged the water's edge, early morning dew, still clinging to the low branches. The sky hadn't yet decided if it would be blue or gray. My knees ached from the gravel, but I was grateful for the quiet path. I didn't know how I said. Tice nodded like someone pretending they understood. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a photograph creased fading. It was us years ago, him no more than 8. We were fixing the chain on his bike in the driveway, both in mismatched clothes, grease on our fingers. On the back, a note in my handwriting, for later. He held it between us. "Mom said you couldn't handle things, that you drifted." I stopped walking. She wasn't entirely wrong, but she also left out context. He looked down. I believed her for a long time. "That's okay," I said. "People believe what helps them survive." We reached a bench facing the water. I sat. So did he. A jogger passed, nodded politely. The rest of the world kept going. Tice pulled out a thermos and poured coffee into 2 flimsy hotel cups. "I haven't slept well since the reception," he admitted. "I've had years of practice," I replied. He chuckled dryly, then stared at the river. "You wrote, 'I was never absent, just erased.' That stuck with me." I nodded. "Some disappearances are silent. No slammed doors, just revision." He handed me one of the cups. My hands trembled slightly as I took it. Steam rose in tendrils. He stood up again, pacing a few steps. "I remember that day," he said, gesturing to the photo. "You taught me to tighten the brake wire. I thought it was magic how the bike stopped smoother after that." I smiled faintly. "It was always about tension, just enough pressure, not too much." Tice snorted. "Metaphors, huh?" The moment held. A mist of memory crept in Sunday mornings. At the garage, Tice bouncing a tennis ball while I repaired a toaster. Mina's voice calling from the kitchen, laughter echoing across a tighter, less complicated space. "You know," I said slowly, "Mina wasn't always like this. We used to dream about Montana, about chickens and a porch swing. It just changed." He nodded. "Marlene always said you checked out, but I remember watching you leave in the mornings. You wore the same coat for years." "That coat cost $42. I chuckled, then sighed. "Some fights I thought I'd win just by showing up. Turns out showing up isn't enough when people start erasing the minutes you were there." He didn't speak. Just sat back down and took out the thermos again. He poured a refill but didn't drink his, just held it. Do you think people can undo things? Not big things. But pieces of it. I took a sip. Bitter, a little sour. Sometimes it's not about undoing, it's about acknowledging, saying yes, that happened. And I still see you. He placed the cup beside him on the bench and leaned back. When did you know? He asked. That they cut you out of the account, the plans, all of it. Not right away. It took years. But there's a difference between being left behind and being erased. He was quiet, pulling his hoodie tighter around his frame. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I didn't think you were ready to listen. And maybe I wasn't ready to speak. The sun finally peeked through the tree line. The river looked less like a wall and more like a mirror. We sat without words for a while. Finally, he cleared his throat. So, brunch. Is that a yes? It's a start, I said. Then my phone buzzed again. The phone buzzed once more. I didn't look at it yet. Instead, I watched Tice stretch his legs out, sneakers nudging the gravel. His hair caught a glint of sunlight, reminding me of when he was 5. Barreling down the hall in socked feet, crashing into my knees just to say I found my dinosaur, as if the world had been saved. He must have felt me watching because he turned. I still have that T-Rex on my shelf. I laughed softly, the one with the chipped tail. Yup. Silence returned, but it wasn't cold now. Just quiet, the way rivers are. Still moving, still deep. I finally read the rest of Avra's message. They said it could go public as early as Monday. I'll only give them what you approve. Tice peered over, sensing the shift. You good? I looked at him, this man I helped raise who carried pieces of me, even when he didn't know it. And I thought about all the things fathers don't say, not because they don't feel them, but because the right moment keeps slipping away. I'm getting there, I said. Then handed him the photo again. This is yours now. He tucked it carefully into his pocket, then nudged my elbow. I'll get the check next Sunday, he said, standing. But you're tipping. We laughed easily this time. As he walked ahead, hands in pockets, I stayed back a moment longer. Mug still warm against my palms. Sun brushing its gold rim where the crack had been filled. The birds had returned to the trees. The path behind us was already drying. And for once I didn't feel like a footnote. I felt like the author. We set a table for 6. 8 came. The extra chairs creaked when pulled from the shed, one still webbed with a forgotten spider's thread. Tice swatted it away without a word, then gave me a look, a mix of apology and amusement. In the middle of the backyard, the folding table sagged, slightly dressed in an old gingham cloth. The morning sun broke through the last chill of Arkansas fall, dappling light across mismatched mugs, a thermos of warm cider and pancakes that refused to stay warm. My apron was too small. It had a red maple leaf embroidered in the corner, Avra's gift years ago, back when I still brought casseroles to HR potlucks. I flipped the pancakes carefully, even though most had cooled already. The guests weren't here for the food. Tice stood beside me, holding plates, offering smiles. I didn't expect the intern to show, he whispered. Or Mrs. Callahan from your old team. She brought apple butter, I said. She also brought a binder, he replied. The yard filled slowly, 2 neighbors from my building, an intern from Avra's network, and 2 former HR colleagues I hadn't seen in years. They didn't ask questions. They brought stories. In the center of the table sat the local newspaper, folded neatly. The headline read, Retired Auditor Exposes Pension Drift Scandal. Corporate Response Under Review. My name appeared in the second paragraph, not at the top. That was fine by me. Mina arrived last. She didn't knock or call ahead. No makeup. Hair tied back. She stood at the edge of the yard, like someone inspecting a memory from the wrong side of time. Tice walked over, offered her a cider. She took it with both hands, nodding not at him, not at me, but maybe at the years between. She didn't sit, just wandered near the fence, tracing the wood with her finger. Before leaving, she slipped a small envelope onto the garden bench. I didn't open it then. I knew what it said. Later, when everyone had filled their plates, Tice raised his glass. His voice wavered not from fear, but weight. To voices that took longer but still arrived. Laughter followed. Real, full-bellied laughter. Even from Mrs. Callahan, whose sternness had once terrified entire intern classes. I finally poured myself a mug of cider and sipped. The repaired ceramic cup held firm. Still a faint hairline crack beneath the glaze, but solid, strong. After everyone left, the quiet returned, not as absence but as space. The kind of quiet you don't fight, just sit in. I walked the perimeter of the yard, shoes crunching faint acorns, the tang of cinnamon still on my breath. A neighbor's wind chime played a half-tune with the breeze, and from far down the road, a dog barked, not at anything, just at being. Inside, I peeled off the apron and hung it over the back of the chair. The dishes could wait. I opened the fridge, found Tice's labeled container, "Dad, eat this, don't inspect it," and smiled. Leftover pancakes, now the best I'd ever tasted. I pulled out a manila folder from beneath a stack of old tax returns. The title, once written in thick marker, had faded. Final statement. Wolf. I didn't open it. Not tonight. But I traced the edge with my thumb, grounding myself in the simple weight of a truth that had finally been heard. My phone buzzed a message from Avra Media, rescheduled for Friday. "Want me to sit in?" I typed back. "Only if you promise to bring that peach cobbler." She replied with a thumbs up, then a second message. "You did good, Darvin." The window glass fogged slightly as the temperature dropped. I pressed my palm against it, watching the shape disappear in slow motion. Backyard lights flicked on by sensor. The empty chair was still there, facing the fence. I went back out, picked it up, and brought it inside. Set it next to mine. The note from Mina I folded and slipped into the crack of a photo frame. Not to preserve her words, but the moment she chose them. Later that night, I brewed one more cup of tea, no caffeine, just warmth. Sat down, turned on the radio to a soft jazz channel, not to listen, but to fill the room with something alive. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting to be invited. I was already here. The mug held steady this time. Warm cider, no leaks, just a faint line beneath the glaze. Out back, the wind rustled the fence where Mina's note once rested, and Tice's laughter echoed faintly from the kitchen. Turns out, justice isn't always a gavel. It's sometimes a brunch table set for those who stayed and those who finally showed up. I used to think silence kept things intact. But some cracks need to sound so the truth can breathe through. If life ever nudged you out of your own story, don't worry, there's always a way back to the page. Have you ever had a second chance wrapped in something you first mistook for loss? Feel free to share it. I'll be here, mug in hand.